Hey guys, MTBtrigger here. Welcome back to the EXFIL BootCAMP series. Today we're going to be going over some game settings and keybinds that I believe are critical to PvP in Tarkov. I also think these are going to be good to go over for someone who's brand new to Tarkov, so if you're new and you're scared of PvP still, don't worry, hang out. I think you'll find these useful as well. So before we jump into it, if you're looking for some deep dives into Tarkov content and the mindset and all kinds of different subjects, make sure you catch the EXFIL podcast. It's a weekly podcast we do. It's on YouTube, and it's on basically any audio platform that you listen to podcasts on. And if you want to ask me live, you can catch me a few days a week on Twitch, and I'll answer any and all questions there. But for now, let's get into it. And we're going to start with some basic settings. But again, everything's under the guise of making you more efficient in PvP. So first of all, let's go into the settings menu, go to the far left context menu. We're going to go to the game settings. There's two here I want to go over. And the first one is this setting called FOV, or field of view. Now, most games use a horizontal field of view. Tarkov actually does it vertically. So I'm used to playing with a field of view of 90 degrees on a horizontal scale, and the equivalent of that in Tarkov is roughly 59. Now, there's some great guides out here on different FOVs in other games and how they translate to Tarkov, but I play most every other game with a 90 degree field of view, and in Tarkov that's 59. What you really need to know about the field of view in Tarkov is that the higher you have it, when it comes to those medium and long-range shots and spotting, you're actually reducing the number of pixels, and more specifically the hitboxes. You're reducing the size and the number of them the higher the FOV you have. Now, that's not to say you should have the FOV as low as it can go, because that can hurt you in close quarters. Typically, somewhere in the middle is what I would recommend, somewhere from like 57 to 65. But I know people that play on both ends of the spectrum. So again, just know that that's what you're doing. The higher you go, you're actually hurting yourself in the mid to long range fights, which is what most people are trying to get better at in Tarkov. So that's FOV. The other one on this screen is head bobbing. Some people really like the realism aspect of the head bob. Personally, I don't like it. I would recommend turning it way down, because the less noise you have on your screen, the better chance you have in a PvP scenario. So now over on the graphics tab, I'm not going to go into every single setting on this, because the skill that I really think everyone needs to evolve is when it comes to Tarkov and any FPS really is spotting. And you can go look at tons of different content creators' settings. You can go look at streamer settings, and they're all going to be different. And my personal recommendation is that you set your textures, your shadows, your visibility, all of that stuff that gives you the best chance to spot differences in the environment, specifically being able to see a player character versus a tree or a bush or grass. So if you turn your details up too high, oftentimes you'll obscure the vision you have at long distance too much to be able to spot somebody. And if you put them too low, you're going to have the problem where everything sort of blends together. So again, you kind of have to find a balance here, and I'm not going to go through every single one of these. You can see what I'm using now, but I would encourage you to do it so that if in your peripheral something is moving on the horizon, you're able to see it. So you can test this with a friend, or you can just mess with one setting at a time to see how it works for you. If you spot a scav way out in the distance, mess with your settings and see how they move across your screen. Now, I do want to draw your attention to a couple things in here. One of them is this game FPS limit. Make sure you turn this all the way up. If you've got a beefy computer and it can pull more frames, make sure you're putting that to use and giving yourself the most frames per second in-game. Second to that is going to be the Z-blur and the noise. Again, adding more noise and blur to your screen is not going to be helpful for you in a PvP scenario. Definitely adds a realism aspect. So again, the lens I'm doing this through is to help you get better at PvP in Tarkov. If you're looking for the most realistic, turn this stuff all the way up, turn the blur on, get that realism effect, absolutely. Now, sound, there's only one on here that I would draw your attention to, and that's the interface volume. I highly recommend turning this down to 10. Not 0, but 10. It's going to reduce the sound of the stuff you're doing in your inventory to as low as it can go, but I do think it's important to have it at least on 10 because you're going to hear the sounds you're making, like when you're healing and when you're doing those things in your inventory or your stash, so that you know what the other person might be hearing, but you want to minimize those as much as possible so that you can hear other player sounds. So those are the big settings that I think are good to look at from a PvP mindset. Now let's look at controls. So as far as key bindings go, and I'm going to show you some of this in the shooting range, but there's some that are really important, and you may say, yeah, they're really important, but I want to show you why, because you may not know just how important some of these are. So the first one is just leaning. If you're coming from a different game type or a different FPS even that doesn't have leaning, leaning is one of the most critical PvP maneuvers that you have, and in Tarkov it's even more important. So let me show you why. If we go into our hideout here, right, so default is Q and E. Q leans left, E leans right. Now, the thing with leaning is, if you're, say this was a wall right here, and there's an enemy over there. Now, if you're going up against a scav or a player scav, and they don't have very good ammo, if they know the ammo types, the cheaper ammos typically have higher flesh damage, so they're going to be looking to shoot you in your limbs. And so where leaning becomes really important is when you're leaning around an object or a door frame or a wall, and you're only exposing your chest and your head, well, that's eliminating the ability for the enemy to shoot at your legs. They may only have access to your arm and your face that's not covered by a helmet, and if you have a face shield, it's even reducing that further. So leaning is critical in this game, especially when fighting scavs and player scavs that may be using ammo that they're targeting your limbs on. So that's the first most important. And again, it just reduces how much of your body the player can see. So that's leaning. Now, the next one, and this is one that a lot of people aren't aware of, is this smooth lean left or right. It's default to hitting Alt and then D or A to move left or right. And the reason this one's really important is in this game, again, Tarkov is focused on realism. So when you hit strafe, you're actually taking a step. So when you're in a gameplay scenario, if you're aiming here and you're trying to get your cursor just outside of this wall or whatever it is, and you hit strafe, you notice how big that step is when you're zoomed in. Now, the reason smooth lean's helpful is, again, left and right lean have specific amounts of distance that they lean. Well, smooth lean allows you to hold Alt, and then you can adjust your lean to be perfect. You can get exactly where you want to get. You can even use it to kind of peek around an object a little bit. And it just gives you the ability to really pinpoint where you want to be on your lean. So don't sleep on this one. It's a really good key because, again, you don't want to expose. If you're trying to shoot somebody that's here, you do not want to be so exposed where you're aiming out here. Use that lean function so that you're tight if you're holding that angle. So again, just a nice one to know and use. So other settings that are really nice, and this might be the most important part in the video, is the key bindings and subsequently the secondary key bindings for switching scopes and changing magnification. Now, I didn't even know that there were scopes that had different magnifications. I mean, I knew it from the name of them, but I didn't even start using this until I was in my mid-30s. I wasn't changing the magnification on scopes. So if you're using the default scope keys, right? So control right click to change the various scopes. And on this gun, I've got a variable zoom scope, I've got a canted sight, and then the scope actually has sights on top of it. So I have 3 that I can toggle between. So the default is control right click. If I control right click, you notice how I unscope and then change scopes and then do it again. Now that seems fine when you're in here and it's an unmoving target, but if someone's moving through the woods, say left to right, and you spot them with your short range, and then, you're trying to track them, you're going to make it really hard for yourself to aim and keep up with them. And if it's a player, they're not going to run in a straight line. They may crouch, they may take cover. So the first key binding, and I would highly recommend that you use what Tarkov gives you, is that you can put a secondary keybind, and these changing scopes or changing magnification, I think it's critical to have it in easy to reach place, whether your left hand or your right hand, to make sure that you can switch scopes very easily without having to use both hands. So that control left or control right click, that's killing your ability to move at the same time. Whereas I put it on mouse 3 or shift mouse 3 to change magnifications. And let me show you how smooth this is. If I'm zoomed in and I hit mouse 3, it just easily shifts between all my scopes so I can keep tracking the target and I'm not unzooming and rezooming. It maintains the magnification level, which is really nice. Now, furthermore, if I hit shift right or shift mouse 3, I can go in between my magnification and I can still use my movement keys here. So again, it's just a little trick that can help you maintain sight on the target without zooming and rezooming over and over. And I think what you'll find here is it's going to help you track the target a lot better. So I'd highly recommend, it doesn't have to be mouse 3, but I'd highly recommend that you take the time to find a good keybind for changing your scope and changing your magnification. Okay, so other ones that I think you should look at are what you have bound to reload and quick reload. Now, the reason I'm drawing your attention to this is the default is reload is set to release, and quick weapon reload is set to double tap on R. Now, the reason I changed this to press, and then I completely changed the quick weapon reload to shift R, is because when I hit R, I want my gun to reload immediately. If you leave it on release, it's adding in the time of letting go of the button. And then if you have quick reload on double tap R, if you look down here in the bottom right, there's a double click timeout of 0.3 seconds. So you're adding in the time that it takes to release the key, and then the game is waiting 3/10 of a second for you to see if it's going to double click again. Right? So if you change this from not only release to press, and then you change the binding of quick reload altogether, when you hit R, you're just going to reload your mag, and you're also not mistakenly double clicking R and throwing your mag on the ground. It's tiny little things like this, but if you have to reload 2 or 3 times in one battle, you're adding a full second to your ability to shoot the other person. So again, for PvP purposes, I highly recommend changing your keybinds here. And you can see how I do it. I like reload on R on a press, and I also like quick weapon reload to be shift R on a press. So if I need to do something really quick, shift R. But again, most of the time now I just hit R because it reloads immediately, because there's no double click delay and there's no release delay. So the other one that I'd encourage you to change, and it's just a little minor thing, but checking the time and exits, I would change that to be a press on O for the time and exits. It's a double click. It's flipped. I have it flipped. So it's usually defaulted where if you hit O, it just shows you the time. And if you double tap O, it shows you the time and the EXFILs. I would switch those. That way when you just single tap O, it shows you the time and the EXFILs. It just has to do with that release and the buttons being registered. I think it's a lot better if you just hit O and it brings up the exits. Just a little tip there. Now, where I'm at right now, there's some functions that I'm not quite good at yet, but I will draw your attention to, are these blind fires. So the overhead blind fire and the right blind fire. Now, I'm starting to work on these. I don't use them very well at all, but you can blind fire around corners. You can blind chuck a nade around a corner, and they're super effective. I'm still working on them. I'm not very good at yet. So if you know a good bind for the blind fires or blind throwing a grenade, put that in the comments, because I'm not sure exactly where to bind these to be effective. But the W and Alt and the S and Alt, it's just not working really well for me. But for those of you that are getting more advanced in combat, being able to shoot over a barrel or around a door to your right, really, really important. So anyway, those are the settings that I wanted to draw your attention to. Thanks for hanging out. Hopefully this helps. If you learned something, let me know down in the comments, and we'll see you soon with some more guides. Hope you have a great one. So there you go. Hopefully this helps you in some way in a PvP scenario. And if there's a setting you disagree with or you just weren't sure about, let us know in the comments, or feel free to reach out to us in the Discord. We check that all day long. But hopefully this helps you, and we'll get back to you in the next boot camp guide coming up very soon. Hope you have a great day. Talk to you soon.